Welcome to the Headliners. My name is Edwin Beche. I'm the founder and CEO of Helen Super App. Today, I have a guest named Peter Lynch. Peter is a speaker, coach, and a proud dad. And his mission is to empower entrepreneur to go from revenue plateau to to self sabotage to breakthrough performance and profit, so they can serve more people and fulfill their purpose. Peter,
hmm
how are you?
Man, doing great.
Welcome to the
Happy to
show,
be
man.
here. Yeah, excited to be here.
Welcome to the show. How are you, man? How you been?
Oh, great. We just doing this kind of digital nomad lifestyle. So just
Mhm.
moved into a new place here on island outside of Tampa Bay area in Florida,
Mhm.
and it's
Mhm.
it's cool. Got a view of the golf course right now. It's pretty beautiful.
Just enjoying that. Yeah, that's enjoying that. Do you play golf?
Like uh, it's one of those things I always want to do, and so I'd embarrass myself more than anything. I'm pretty good at the driving range,
But
pretty good at
but at least
whacking,
you
hitting the ball as hard as I can. But when it comes to putting, I'm
yeah,
just, oh man,
just
I
miss
fall
it.
apart.
Like you.
Yeah, I fall apart, man. I start to lose it.
That's good. Peter, let's do this. Let's go back. I always do this maybe with on the show. Um, just kind of introduce yourself, meaning let's pick it up from where you from, how you grew up. Like just give us a history a little bit for people to kind of know who's Peter Lynch.
Yeah, yeah, it's the history of
Mhm.
man. I grew up in a missionary as a missionary's kid, right? So we
Yeah.
grew up traveling a lot. So I got to see some really interesting parts of the world, including Ukraine. Actually, grew up
Mhm.
there. So that's really where when we were four
Mhm.
was when we moved there. So I used to speak Russian fluently because we were in eastern Ukraine, which is
Yeah.
interesting. What with the tragic the political situation there
Yeah.
now and what's going
Mhm.
on, right? But that's where I grew up. So American born, raised in Ukraine. Then we moved to went and visited Australia a couple times. I love Australia. Um, and then came back to the states, and things just kind of changed in the like my teenage years. Just kind of everything just kind of hit this. Felt like it hit this. Just everything stopped. Everything
Yeah.
just hit this mire, and
Is that
I sunk deep.
like a culture exchange type? Like what do you mean? Like when you say hits different?
No, it's just like everything that was like before that life was a little more exciting. Like things were going on. And then what was like the whole missionary work ended and we just kind of came back and my parents were trying to reintegrate into kind of more or less normal life, whatever we call
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah.
And wasn't a fit for them. And so we just kind of weren't doing anything, right? So like life was just kind of trying to figure it out and not really going anywhere. And I'm a teenager and starting to come into this age of life where you're starting to try to figure out, well, where am I going? What am I doing?
Yeah.
And the reality was I was deeply depressed and I was also in denial about it because being in the kind of home that I grew up in, it's not okay to be depressed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's actually not okay to have problems because that means like somehow you have a lack of faith, right?
Yeah.
And you're missing your relationship with Jesus.
And
And
it's you have
and
like it's like you have sin or something, whatever.
yeah,
Yeah.
like something's
Kind of
wrong with you.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
and that was the identity that I took on was that there's something wrong with me. And
Mm.
my only response to that was to try to suppress it and hide it and pretend that no, I'm okay because you got to be okay. You have to be okay because,
Yeah.
otherwise there's something wrong with you. So I was just struggling with that deeply. Ended up moving to Alaska when I was 20 because I'd finished high school, was going to college, getting great grades, but I didn't know what I was doing. So I was
Yeah.
at top of my class, super super smart, just nailing all these tests.
Yeah.
Everybody else in the class was like always coming to me with questions and wanted basically private tutoring outside of class from me because I was just acing everything. But I also felt like, man, what am I doing? I don't even know why I'm doing this. I just
Yeah.
felt so lost inside. I felt like I had no purpose. I had no direction. Everything felt deeply meaningless to me. I felt meaningless. I felt like my life was pointless. And so but I'm also struggling with the sense of, well, I can't, that's not okay. It's not
Yeah.
okay to feel that way. So I need to just try to turn it off and keep going, but keep going for what? There was no answer for me. And and I was struggling deeply coming from a background of faith, coming from a Christian home, and that, but also with this, this problem, as I was explaining to you, of like that at the same time that it was not okay to struggle, which is a deep problem. It's always, you always have to confront your struggle. You always have to face it. But I didn't understand that at the time. So I go to Alaska, still in denial. I moved there in October because that's the smart time to move to Alaska.
Yeah, no.
Right in time
Oh,
for it. The temperatures dropped. I get
yeah.
there, and like 2 weeks later, it snows for a couple days, and then the temperatures drop to -20 Fahrenheit, and they stay there
Ouch.
for 2 weeks. So it's
Yeah.
just frozen. It's
Wow.
cold. It's dark, and I'm
Yeah.
kind of just, and it feels like the walls are just kind of coming in on my
Yeah.
life. My whole experience is becoming close and closed, and then I get a job as a nighttime caregiver to a dying man. So I'm spending my nights taking care of a man who's on medication. He's got dementia.
At that time is not with Alaska with that time frame. It's not really. You never know which is night or day. It's still same. It's the same thing, right?
It's Yeah, it was about like so I was in Anchorage area, a little north of Anchorage, so it wasn't like we would just be pitch black, but
Yeah.
it's only about 3 hours that the sun was actually up.
Yeah.
You got about 5 hours of daylight, quasi daylight. So
Yeah.
yeah. So
So you
but
take
then I'm awake all night, so I'm sleeping during the day. So I
Mhm.
wouldn't see the sun. And so so then I have the external kind of aspect of the depressive environment, because seasonal affective depressive disorder is called SAD, right? The is a
Yeah. Yeah.
legitimate thing up there. Everybody kind of gets a little depressed in the winter. Some people are kind of crazy and they like it, and they don't. For me, it affected me
So at
heavily.
this, yeah. So at this time, you're 20. You're still 20, right? You're taking
Hmm.
care of this elder, uh, with
Yep.
probably with no friends in the new area. I mean, except for your classmate that they're taking advantage for you to help them,
Right.
like
Right.
get great. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. New people, and like I didn't know anybody. I just went because kind of a friend of somebody I knew said, "Hey, there's this. Alaska's a great place to go." So I had kind of this dorm uh, house type opportunity to move into. So it's a bit of a landing pad of somewhere that I knew I could go to, but I didn't know anybody there. So yeah, like and there was this sense of I was trying to. It's like I was dealing like unconsciously, subconsciously. I knew that I had to separate myself from my old life.
Yeah.
And consciously, on a conscious level, I just thought, well, if I can just get away from Pueblo, Colorado, that's where I was. Pueblo, Colorado, it's the armpit of Colorado. If I can just get out of there, everything will be better. And what I came face to face with in Alaska was that, there's this quote that says, "A place cannot save you, for there is no place where you can escape from yourself." And that sunk in hard for me as I realized, well, my problems are within me, and I brought them with me.
Mm.
So for me to grow past my problems, I have to face my problems. And that's
Yeah.
what happened for me is I would just go out at night alone we live next to 50 acres, which everything in Alaska, if it's not developed, it's just wilderness,
Yeah.
like you
Yeah.
got to work to develop anything in Alaska. So at 50 acres, it's just woods and wilderness. And I
Yeah.
go out there alone in the snow and just grappling with like I felt like I was always standing on the edge of the precipice of the void, dealing with the question of why bother, why be here, why live. Very,
Wow.
very much, coming face to face with the empty void of just emptiness, nothingness, nihilism, all of it just sucking at my soul, and tearing at me, with this kind of this a definite temptation to just throw it away, because why bother? Why bother being here? I feel
So
empty. I feel pointless.
at this time, do you have friends? Are you going to church? Are you involved in church, like with your parents? Like, what is this like at this time? Like,
Yep.
um,
Yeah. No, I was going to church. I was
do you
actually
have,
living.
even to add to that? Do you even have a girlfriend at this time?
No, no girlfriend.
Yeah.
No, that was one of my. That was one of. That was a sore point for me. I was always kind of
Yeah.
a loser when it came to girlfriend. No, I was so awkward around girls, man. No, I couldn't. No,
Yeah.
no girlfriend. I had a few girls I was interested in that never went anywhere. That always kind of reinforced the sense of I'm a loser, I'm an embarrassment, like all this stuff. And I was just full of self degradation, a lot of
So yeah,
negative
it's,
self talk.
yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, yeah. But I was going to church, and actually lived right close to a church. So I mean, it was walking distance. So I had access to that, and I would go there go there at night too, sometimes just to pray by myself and just grappling with all this, and part of the beauty of what I came to there, because it's like, I wish I could say there was like some magic moment where everything changed. There
Mm.
was a real turning point there in those dark nights alone, where I clung to, okay, well, I'm going to turn away, I'm going to live for something. I don't know what yet. So again, I'm
Yeah.
entrusting that to God, in the sense of, okay, God, you put me here. I feel a call in my heart to do something. I don't know what. I don't feel capable, but I'm going to persevere.
Mm. So this is kind of really scary because it's like full blown depressed and going through this stuff, but you don't have someone to talk to you. But at the same time, you don't want to talk to your parents because also you have this thing scared of the hey, if I show this emotion, it's gonna look like hey, I'm failing or I don't believe in God kind of type thing, right?
Yeah,
So which is scary. How did you end up overcoming that? Like, did you end up talking to your parents? Do you end up like like maybe going in a what is it called? I'm sorry. I don't like how like you go in church and then you have to declare your sin or whatever that thing is called again.
confession kind of thing.
Confession. No, sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, yeah. Do you have to
Yeah,
do things like that? Well, yeah.
yeah. So I'm a church that I go to is
Okay.
Orthodox Christian church. So we do have the sacrament of confession in my church. But it's interesting. Even there, it's like, well, you can go confess, but there's something about like coming to the deeper understanding of what's actually going on, what's at the
Mhm.
root, and taking ownership. And that's the beauty of this journey for me. Was, I would say, the key to it. No, I mean, to answer some of your, some of those questions in there. Did I talk to my parents? Now, have I
Mhm.
talked to them about it? Somewhat, but they still don't accept it, because the part of what makes that so difficult is the reality is that, I mean, you don't just grow up to be a suicidal, depressed teenager without something being at the root of that, because it's unnatural, right? God did not create us to be depressed. He didn't
Yeah.
make us for anxiety, right? So those are states that are a symptom of something is missing, something's wrong.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, that's only there, though, it's not there so that we just suffer. We're not meant to just suffer pointlessly. Suffering is a part of life, but that suffering is there for us to transform. The suffering is a part of that transformation, but it comes with taking the ownership. And that's where I was. That's what comes. So confession, yes, but the confession was there to help me take the ownership of this. This is coming from within me. It's not coming from without of me. So a major then that so there was that kind of that moment of, I'm going to live, a moment of decision in the dark night, where I'm like, I'm going to live for something. And then that journey just became of learning, well, what is that? How do I do that? Right. So over years, then, as well, I'm getting ready to turn 33 next month. So
Mhm.
it's 13, almost going on 13 years later, right? That's a long journey to where I am today. And there's been a lot of other milestones along that journey. But one of the most important things that's come home for me through that journey is taking ownership, realizing that the pain, the wounds, all of this comes from within me. And if it's going to heal, it's on me. The responsibility is on me to take ownership and to go within and do the work to heal those wounds and to allow the healing to happen. Because it's not that I necessarily heal myself, right? I'm always
Yeah.
reminded of the paralytic by the pool of Bethsaida, who, has been paralyzed 30 years, and he's waiting to get into this pool where the angel comes and stirs the waters and it heals people. But he's paralyzed. He can't get in the water. So he's been there 30 years. And Jesus
Yeah.
comes to him and says, "Do you want to be made whole?" And he just makes excuses. And then Jesus's response to that is, "Rise, take up your bed and walk." And it sunk home heavily for me. It's like, well, and that underlines everything that I have to say about this. Is it's up to us to
Mhm.
rise, take up your bed and walk, whatever that bed is. My bed was all my sadness, all my wounding, all my pain, anger at my parents, because there was a lot of just kind of hidden trauma throughout my child, anger at my brother, anger at, all kinds of things. There was a lot of pain. And so that was also another journey of learning, well, what is forgiveness too? Because I think that's another place we get tripped up. Oh, you just got to forgive. And that's still a stance that people in my life have, of like, oh, you just haven't forgiven. I do forgive, but forgiveness is contingent upon acknowledging what was wrong. If I'm forgiving somebody, I'm saying, what you did was wrong and it hurt me, but I
Mhm.
forgive you, and
Yeah.
I forgive you. It's not to say, oh, it's okay, it doesn't matter, you didn't
Yeah.
do anything wrong. The problem was that is then you're taking it's like, oh, it wasn't them, it was me, which was what I grew up with. I grew up, the teasing was, for instance, teasing was ruthless and cruel and harsh. As nobody knew how to just come out and have conflict, healthy conflict. So if there
Yeah.
was ever an issue, they'd tease you about it, and I would just get teased ruthlessly as the youngest. And it was, I adopted this mentality that was like, well, it was my fault. If I just was a better person, I could take the teasing. It's not their fault, it's mine. When the reality is it's both.
Yeah.
It's always both. It's equal
So,
responsibility.
so do you think, like, so I'm looking at this, like, because you're like on this box where it's like you're fighting, trying to find solution for you to help yourself get out of it. And I'm sure there's some other kids who are going through right now the same thing where they have this thing is saying like, hey, if I'm not this, it's a sin, or because maybe what has been taught to them by their parents, like if you do this, it's a sin, you're gonna go to
Yep.
hell, or so how do you see a way, or what would you say to them to help them transition to that point, like where, because it feels like maybe you're not just exposed to a lot of this, like it's almost like I'm looking at like uh there's religious and science, almost kind of, you gotta balance them both,
Hmm.
instead of like if you go extreme just religious, you're like
Hmm.
way off. If you go extreme in on science, also you're way off. So how do
Yeah.
you balance that, or how do you kind
Mm,
of figure a way to kind of teach people, I mean,
I love
these
that.
young people, maybe to kind of overcome that kind
I love that. Yeah, thanks for, yeah, that's such a good question, and I really appreciate that because I feel like that's a big part of my work and my mission is kind of to bring some sort of balance. Because honestly, like the background was that over religious for my family. It was just super fundamental religious. If you have a health problem, you pray about it and you expect a miracle, right? You don't go see a doctor because doctors and science are bad. And then
of.
when science wants to talk about how things have developed, it's like, oh, that's bad, and we don't, for me, it's like, listen, science is the way that we understand God's creation. And if you're not going to it's the way that we understand reality. And when you understand reality, you can
Yeah.
operate in a healthy way within that reality. You know what I mean? We're not going to go out there and just ignore gravity. That would be
Yeah.
neurotic. But
Yeah.
gravity is science.
Yeah.
So what do we do about that, right? So then on the same side, well, there's a lot of science going on behind the state, the chemical state of the brain behind depression, right? And how we can shift that and alter that. But I'm also not, I don't believe that pharmaceuticals are an answer. They can be something that can help move you out of the state temporarily, but they don't take you to positive. They only can bring you to neutral.
Yeah.
It's up to us to take that ownership and do the healing work to go
Yeah.
into a positive state where you are meant to be. So there's that. Yeah, there's that. Looking at, well, how do we integrate both of those? Because there's, everything takes faith, though. That's part of the fundamental of this. If you
Yeah.
believe, if like, there's a lot of people that say, to take the stance, and maybe somebody listening, like, I just believe in science, right? We hear that. That's a statement that's made. And I would challenge anybody who says that, like, listen, you're still making a belief statement. That's a statement of faith. If you
Yeah.
believe in science, you
That's faith.
believe,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
faith, my friends.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's this mystery that we don't, because science is also like, oh man, it's just fascinating because there's the law of observation too. Neutrons react. We never actually see a new, right? There's, or yeah, oh, sorry, electrons, because there's protons, neutrons make the nucleus of an atom, and then there's the electrons that circle around it. Circle is our closest way of defining it, right? Because they're this energy ball is what it comes down to. So everything that we think of as reality and as material, right? This mug, I'm frozen on my camera, so I'm hoping I'm showing up. But like, if
Yeah. Yeah.
I
You
can't.
sure? Yeah. Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
I can't put my fingers through the mug, right? So I think, oh, this is solid,
Yeah.
right? I can trust, I can count on, this is solid reality,
Yeah.
right? I'm sitting in this chair on this floor, but the reality of it is that it's all of matter, material, mass is all 99.9% empty space. And we don't know what that emptiness is. So
Yeah.
all that's holding it together is energy, right? So that what I'm getting at here is like, that's right there, this fascinating overlap of faith and science to me, right?
Mhm.
Because because that is even in theology we talk about the energy and the essence of God, that no man knows the essence of God because it's beyond us, but we all engage with and interact with and experience his energies, right? And so it's like that energy is the very life force, so we're all projecting and receiving energy, we're engaging with energy, so our being is greater than our body because there's an energy field around us, and that is scientific, but you can't see it. So you have to have faith to believe it, but also once you believe it, you also see it. It's this interesting thing, right? I'll believe it when I see it, that kind of statement. It's like, well, then you're denying yourself the ability to actually receive the thing.
Yeah.
So anyway, a bit of tangents here. I don't know if I'm answering the question, but it
Yeah,
just,
yeah, yes. This is
you
great.
know,
This is great. This is great.
the,
Mhm.
yeah, go
As
ahead.
you're talking, so many other questions because I'm thinking so like then I go into um, the people like that do not believe in God,
Mm,
and so there's a difference. There's people who are religious, and then there are
mm-hmm,
people who are spiritual. Those I
mm-hmm,
feel like there are two things where like
mm-hmm,
someone either like yeah they believe in God, but not necessarily like they go to church or whatever,
mm-hmm,
but they believe that there's God and there's
mm-hmm.
this whole everything. And then there's someone who does not believe in God at all. Like either
Right.
they believe in something. I always get stuck like because either I'm not so educated in more kind of teach. So for someone like you who has done who had like you went through all this and you have found a balance. When you meet someone who say they do not believe in God, how do you explain to the person like that? Or do you be like, hey man, you're older enough. If you don't believe in God, I don't have a way to teach you to believe in God or to
You know,
believe
it's
that
an
there's a
interesting,
God. Oh,
yeah.
mhm. Yeah,
So yeah, no, that's great. So I mean, it comes down to this interesting thing for me, which was part of what was repellent to me in the church mentality that I grew up with, right? And I
yeah,
say church mentality because it's different than what I believe is, you know, it. And I think that's what a lot of people are reacting to is that religious aspect. And there is structure, right? Because sometimes the overreaction is to just say, oh well, now we don't need any structure. Religion is structure and it's man's order and there's
yeah,
problems with it. Yes, there's a lot of issues with it because people are people. It
yeah,
doesn't change right from the start. If you're looking at Acts and all the epistles in the Bible, right from the start, there's a bunch of churches that are being convicted of, hey, you're messing up pretty bad, right? So people are people. We don't change. We just got to grow. So and the
yeah,
only way to grow is to confront yourself. You know, that's
yeah,
part of the issue with, say, even like when we're talking about spiritual stuff, it's like, well, there's a lot, the new age and the new thought kind of stuff. Well, the problem there is it wants to sidestep suffering. It wants the transformation without the process, and that will never happen. You have to go through the process, which is to face yourself, to
yeah,
take up your cross daily. What is your cross? Well, it's your calling. Your cross is your gift to share with the rest of the world, right? The cross doesn't mean pointless, needless suffering. The cross is also learning, well, what is my gift to share? How do I share it? And going through the process of healing. Because for me, I would not be able to share the message that I have now that you know, and work with the clients that I do. So I'm getting to also a coaching point here, like that question of how do you engage with people is also, that's coaching, that's communication, that's sales, right? I wouldn't be able to do the work that I do if I was still standing in my own way, and I
yeah.
can't do the work that I'm meant
So
to do
growth.
still if
Yeah,
I don't get out of my way, because I'm
yeah,
still standing in my way. I'm just not standing there as much as I was, right? So it's a continuum of growth journey, and the only way that I can become the person that I am meant to be, the person that can do the work in the world that I am called to do, because
mhm,
your calling is not something you choose, that chooses you. That's part of
yeah,
the mystery of it. So you are being called to it. It's not somehow something that you're trying to pull towards you. You
yeah,
have to move. You have to grow because the state you are now is not who you are meant to be. But you are already fully equipped to be that person. That's the mystery of it. You are
yeah,
already fully equipped to achieve your purpose in the world. That means you don't need to, it's not even personal development as much as it is personal becoming, if that makes sense. We're remembering and restoring ourselves, not becoming, because the process of becoming is actually restoration. It's not trying to add. If anything, we're removing the layers, the baggage that are keeping us back. So now that I've opened up that can of worms, let's come back to answer your question, and maybe we can revisit there because I know there's a lot there.
yeah,
But you know, if somebody's saying, "Hey, I don't believe in God," Or my question is, well, what God don't you believe in? Because you know what? I probably don't believe in that God either.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But I mean, the other thing too is like, to when we enter into things, what bothered me growing up in the church mentality was this idea that we have to go out there and convince people. And it was
Yeah.
the same thing that I saw in sales. You know, I struggled deeply when I started my business because I struggled with sales. I would actually have panic attacks because like because of the wounding and the, you know, I would get triggered. And I'm like, oh man, there's going to be conflict, there's going to be confrontation, and all of that for me as a child was super dangerous. And I
Yeah.
would get, you're right, it was even physically dangerous to have confrontation or challenge. So then in sales, it's like, well, man, this is tough. I'm going to have confrontation. I'm going to have challenge. There's another man who's a little older than me or older enough that like it would just trigger my inner child and I'd freak out and get sweaty and I couldn't talk. Right. So, I mean, I'm like, I really struggled with sales, but I've got to sell if I'm going to support my family. And I'm
Yeah.
also not going back because I'm not going back to the job where I was working 60, 70 hours a week and
Yeah.
dead tired on the weekend and not even able to spend time with my newborn daughter, right? I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm not going back. I'm moving forward. Now
Yeah.
I've got to go through this pain of confronting myself and learning to sell. And I realized that, like, well, part of what I hate in sales, not to, you know, so my own trauma aside, that had to heal. But also the dynamic of sales deeply bothered me because the people I was learning from had the same approach as somebody who's out there trying to convince people of their religion, trying to shove it down somebody's throat, beat them over the head with some holy book or another, you know, and it all becomes the same thing. Why are you so insecure that you feel like you have to convince other people? You know?
Let's do this before we jump into. I know you coach and help business owners. Last question in the religious part. How do you feel for people that use? I feel like they use the word of God to
Hmm.
enrich themselves instead of really just be there helping the community and being like, hey, these are the people, like they are the pillar of the community, kind of just helping, but for themselves, they're making themselves rich and
Hmm.
just be like, have $1 million house or have private plan. Just how do you feel like the people are those people? They are more, they see church as more like a business, or is it, how do you feel people like that?
Mm. Are you talking about people who kind of have like a almost like a church business, as it were, like
Yeah,
they're
like a
making money?
church business. Yeah, like
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
a person who says they are here to heal the world, but really in reality, these are the people who are making themselves like $1 million revenue, whatever, like just to enrich themselves. Like, hey, I'm
Yeah,
just doing this, yeah, as almost just an income or business kind of way, I would say.
right. Well, it
Mhm.
comes down to what is true, you know, what is the actual goal, and that's part of what I'm getting at with like that idea of not trying to convince people, because sales, you know, I mean, proselyte, you know, evangelism, it shouldn't be to convince people, it should be to transform people, and that comes from within. So it's not
Yeah,
me trying to convince people. I feel like the issue with those kind of businesses, you know, because it's funny because, you know, like on some level everything is business, and I believe everything is sales, because sales is communication, sales is influence, sales is leadership.
yeah,
Sales is power. Power is abused. So what we're talking about is the abuse of a power, because
yeah,
it's the abuse of, and it's also marketing. You know, it's sleazy marketing. It's promising. It's making a superficial promise that people want to hear, and they're ready to kind of get wrapped up in. You know, I mean, it's like, listen, I could promise everybody I'll make you a millionaire overnight, and you know what? I'd probably get some more attraction and interest, but it's not going to last because it's a load of BS.
yeah,
I'm not
yeah,
making anybody a millionaire overnight. Or I
yeah,
could promise you that I'm going to heal, you know, help you transform overnight, you know, move past, be free from imposter syndrome forever. No, but I can empower you to know that when it comes up, and it's not me empowering you, I can show you how to be empowered, and to empower yourself. That's what
mm,
empowerment means. It's not me, it's you. I'm empowering you to do the work for yourself, so that when it comes up, not if, when it comes up, you know how to move past it, so it no longer gets you and
yeah,
drags you down. right? So
Yeah.
I feel like the issue with a lot of these businesses is, yeah, they're wildly successful because they're making an easy promise that's easy to sell, but it's not really fulfilling, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know, it's like just selling, um, it's selling the icing, you know? There's no cake, there's no real meat to it. There's no meal beforehand. It's just, hey, you want cake? Everybody wants cake, but you're not
Yeah.
really sustaining people. So it's easy
Yeah.
to kind of get that fast traction, but it comes down to what's the real purpose behind it. And that's where I'm also hesitant because, like, I don't know. Judgment is the Lord's ultimately. So I can't make a judgment about their own internal state. But I do question, well, what is the end goal for them? Is it to bring people to Christ or is it to bring people to themselves? And that's the same question that I challenge coaches with, because there's a
Yeah.
lot of coaches out there that are trying to make people more like them. You know, it's the idea of they're trying to make other people in their own image, which is a major issue. No,
Yeah.
as a coach, a good coach, I'm only here to help you be the better version of yourself. I don't know what that is. And it's not for me to judge what that is. That's your walk. I'm only here to facilitate the journey so that it can happen at an accelerated rate and happen in the right direction. Because if we don't have that, we just kind of move backwards, right?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's my take on those kind of businesses. It's like it's I don't believe that, I don't believe that wealth is wrong. I don't believe it's wrong to have those things.
Yeah.
But I do believe that if you're getting it the wrong way and if that's your goal, that's that's a real issue.
Brandon said that's $1 million question, and then he goes into say, uh, um, it's
Hmm.
like selling a beautiful house with no foundation.
Yeah, yeah.
Being a follower.
Yeah, some people call themselves Christians and others are followers. Yeah, that's it. What does it mean to actually follow Christ? It means to take up your
Yeah.
cross daily,
Yeah.
right? You're not
Mhm.
doing it for you're doing it for others. Yeah, don't sell a house with no foundation.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
to take sacrifice. Absolutely. Suffering, sacrifice. We talk about being passionate, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this fits right into the entrepreneur conversation too. We talk about being a passionate entrepreneur. What are you passionate about? You
Yeah.
know, it's kind of this buzzword. What is your purpose? What are you passionate about? Passion means willing to suffer.
Yeah.
So what are you passionate for? Well, then you're gonna suffer for it, and you're damn well willing to suffer for that, right? If you're not willing
Yeah.
to suffer for it, you're not passionate about it. So
Yeah.
absolutely, if you're not willing to sacrifice to be a
Yeah.
follower of Christ, then you cannot call yourself a Christian. And you're gonna be it's gonna show in your your actions, your results, not in your words. And that's the other side of it that bothers me. It's easy to say the right things, and it
Yeah.
can make you a lot of money because in marketing, in business, in sales, and in
Mhm.
religion.
Mhm.
Yeah, you can make a lot of money by saying the right words and doing lip service, but are you really willing to sacrifice? Are you
Yeah.
willing to suffer?
So let's jump into this. Like I know with all this, so we jump into how you coach and help entrepreneur. I guess one of the question I was gonna ask, like, what is the key to a confident and like fulfilled life?
Yeah,
And yeah,
yeah, yeah. It
yeah,
fits right in with what we were just talking about with suffering, right? I mean, it's like
yeah,
it's finding that. What are you willing to suffer for? Because
just suffer
that's
exactly.
that interesting dynamic of if there isn't suffering, there
Mm.
isn't fulfillment, there isn't meaning. You know, if there's it's but it's not suffering for suffering's sake. It's not pointless or meaningless suffering.
Mhm.
That's that's unhealthy, right? And that's just being miserable. You know, honestly, that was even a mentality that I had to break free from my own family. Is there's this sense that you just need to be miserable, right? It
Yeah,
comes from this kind of this unhealthy mentality of like sinners in the hands of an angry God, which is again, well, what God do you believe in? Because I don't believe in that God. I don't want
yeah,
to,
yeah, yeah,
So, but still, like, what is the key to a confident, fulfilled life? It really comes down to knowing yourself. And so we're not, it's also being clear on what is the goal. Because this comes back to a real issue is a lot of times we make the process the goal. And that's really dangerous. So suffering is not the goal, it's the process.
it's a
So
process.
you have to be willing to engage with the process, right? And then there's money is part of the process. It's not the goal. If you make money your goal, it's going to be very unfulfilling. You can make a lot of money and still shoot yourself. And people
Yeah,
do that. It's
yeah,
tragic, right? Because they thought once I get money, I'll be happy. No, you can be happy now
with that. Yeah,
and more money will flow to you when you're happy. That's an interesting thing too, right? Because it's dependent on your state.
Mhm.
Right? But what are you making yourself a victim to? And that's part of the process of knowing yourself. So confidence comes from the Latin root word confide, which means understanding, knowledge, right? So when you know yourself, you have confidence. Self-confidence is simply that you're restoring that relationship that is arguably the most important relationship, which is with yourself. I say arguably because I know that it's easy to say, well, the most important relationship is your relationship with God.
Mhm.
But how can you have a relationship with God if you don't even have a relationship with yourself? Right?
Mhm.
Right. So that's the thing of like know yourself, know thyself, as the famous quote from the Oracle of Delphi, right? And the philosophers of Greece and all of that. Know thyself. But what does that actually mean? It means to confront yourself and to come up against your own weakness and to come up against your trauma,
Yeah.
your conditioning, your triggers, and to move beyond that. And once you know yourself, then you also, because also there's this idea of, well, how do I find my gift? You
Mhm.
are your gift. That's another layer of this of belief for me, is that you are your gift. So it comes down to, if you're trying to be something that you're not, which is a false confidence, trying to be
Mhm.
something, but you're not that thing. Well, you're expending a bunch of energy trying to be something that you're not. And in the meantime, you're robbing the world of the gift that is you, because God has made you good and very good. So why are we challenging and doubting that and not just living into it? Because
So
somehow we've
is
been
it
conditioned. Yeah.
is this, Brandon? You will say maybe is this part of like where entrepreneur they work so hard without seeing the results they want
Yeah.
because. Mhm.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
It's a way of burying ourselves from the real work.
Mhm.
There's actually, it's, of course, everything takes work, but there's a condition that I see that really afflicts entrepreneurs, is this idea of like, well, I'm just going to work really hard. But the problem is that we're actually the question that's needed is, what are you hiding from? What are you running from? We're running from some sort of pain. And it's easier to pay the price of the pain of work, busy work is a pain, right? But it's easier to do that pain than it is the real pain of facing yourself. It's the most painful work that there is in the world, to actually confront yourself, to actually come up against your limitations, your own beliefs, and what's really holding you back. Really, we're going down into the depths of the subconscious mind. So again, back to this kind of conversation about religion and science, the way that they overlap and become one thing. My work is very holistic in the sense that it's, yeah, you want a miracle from God, what you got to pray and you have to, right? There's that spiritual side of it, but there's also just the very pragmatic. You are healing your inner child, because when you're triggered and you're doing and you're not seeing the results that you want and you're experiencing self-sabotage, all that's going on is the inner child is reaching up, grabbing the wheel and steering you off. So that happens in business. How often does that happen in business? How
Yeah.
often do we experience self-sabotage? We're like, I've got a good strategy, I know what my goals are, I'm going to go after it, and then why?
Yeah.
Why is because you got a little inner child inside that's freaking out
Yeah.
because of some kind of major conflict, because of conditioning from the past that's saying, like for me, that was, if you make money, you're a bad person. What I'm saying? Real serious conditioning around money and
Yeah.
success. So every
Yeah.
time I'd start to get a little successful, I would drop out. The bottom would just, and I'd be like, man, what happened? I'm
Mhm.
sick physically. I'm like, I'm not doing the work that I need to do, even though I know that like almost inexplicable. But I would just totally bottom out, and then I have to kind of get back. I'd lose a bunch of money, and then get back to a place where I'm starting to make money again, and bottom out again.
Yeah.
Why? Because the inner child is freaking out, going, "Well, we don't want to be a bad person, so we got to fix this."
Yeah.
So again, like working so hard will never get you the results. It's not about the work that you do. It's about appropriate work, appropriate action, but not hard work for, again, don't mistake the process for the end. Work is a process, it's not the end. The end result ultimately has to come down to, well, what is your purpose in life? Which
Yeah.
is found in the process of self-knowledge.
Yeah. So quick question. So like let's say I know with walk me through the process that you have when you have a new founder or like a new business that they need your service for the court. Can you walk me through that? What is the process? What is the strategic that you create for them kind of to be successful in a way? I
Hmm.
was yeah.
Hmm. It's one of these things that's interesting, because it's like, it's just simple. Simple
Yeah.
is good, though. Most of the time when a business is kind of, they've hit this plateau, they're just kind of stagnant, hitting that stagnation point, right? And
Hmm.
it's because of different. on some level, it's just like, well, what we start with the strategic overview. What are you trying to accomplish? Right. And then let's look at, well, are you actually pointed in that direction? Because most of the time, it's like, a lot of times, like, I don't really know what I'm doing. I just got going and it's working. This machine is working around me and I don't understand it and I feel lost. That can be a trigger point for the inner child too, because it's like, I don't want to admit that I don't know. That's a big point too, right? We're trying to be successful, and A players and all this stuff, and nobody wants to acknowledge that, like, well, I actually don't have a clue about this. So it can be, so it's this interesting dynamic of, I start with the big picture. I always start with, let's look at the strategic overview and look at your business systems, but inevitably at every point, it's always going to reflect back to you your own state, your own internal state. Because as it comes back to that principle that your business can only succeed to the ceiling of your own personal growth, your own personal development, right? Your internal state is the cap to your success. So if you're at a six-figure, say you're at $150,000 set point ceiling internally, your business isn't going to go beyond that, because you can't allow it, because your inner child is going to sabotage it. So it becomes, okay, well, let's get the machine running the right direction. And then the beauty of that is, what that does is it eliminates the excuses. Now everything's in line. It should be working. Why isn't it? And we come to a place where, honestly, we're going to eliminate excuses so that there's that opportunity to realize the only limitation that's left is me. I look at David and Goliath, right? David kills Goliath. The Philistines all flee. And then the rest of David's story is really just, after Saul too, then Saul's out. The rest of the Psalms is really.
Oh. Sorry, guys. For some reason, for some technical reason, he just dropped off. For technical weird thing, he just dropped off after talking
Oh
about
my
David
gosh.
and Goliath. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh man.
Yeah,
Yeah, it just comes down to
go ahead, Peter.
the greatest obstacle that we face is ourselves. The greatest challenge we face is in the.
Wow, this is very random for this technical thing. Well, we're using Restream for some reason. With this Restream, I'm not sure if it's your connection or something. It keep coming
Man.
and disappear. Yeah, that's
Yeah, it's
very weird.
odd. I'm getting
Yeah,
full bars. Everything else is running fast, but for some reason, Restream has not liked me today.
that's weird. Yeah,
I'm sorry. That's a bummer. But anyway,
no problem.
well,
Mhm.
I was just ranting a lot anyway, so a good opportunity to give you time to speak again.
That's good. That's good. But Peter, talk to me. Do you think, um, like now, like you're older, do you think that also the experience from when you're a kid, like just maybe just the cultural difference where because you're able to get exposed to other cultures, do you think that helps you also in your life, just on your daily life, like when you remember the kind of, just a different kind of view of the world because you have been exposed to other cultures?
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. It's been an integral part of my formation. I wouldn't be who I am without that. It's really, it's part of that thing that's very mysterious to me, because it almost, it's that interesting thing of like, well, there isn't, I suppose that it just comes down to, nothing's accidental.
Yeah.
It's like, I can see God's hand through it all. It's like fate almost.
Yeah.
Of course I grew up somewhere else, because it gave me a very different perspective. And that perspective is now very important in the work that I do, because that's a huge part, right? What I'm able to do really is just unlock the latent potential of the unknown. That's really, if I'm just going to boil it down to a statement, that is the statement. That's vague. It's open-ended, and you never know what that is. But that's what I do in businesses and for entrepreneurs, because the unknown potential is incredible. It's it's where, right. And so I had a very chaotic upbringing, but it's formed me to be that person that I am today, which is
Yeah.
somebody who very much engages with chaos, to bring that inspiration from the chaos into the order, into the known. Because honestly, as an entrepreneur, you kind of have to function. You have to bring order to things, right? Bringing order to your business, bringing systems, bringing automation, all this stuff. I am not that person. I am the one who engages with the chaos to bring new inspiration so that the order can update. I believe that so that growing up in a different culture very much formed me for that. It was
Mhm.
also an unstable time when we went there because it was shortly after the Soviet Union fell, you know,
Yeah, yeah,
and it exposed me to really different cultures that were there too. It was just fascinating because it wasn't just Ukrainians, there was a lot of other international cultures that were there as well, and they had their pockets of culture, and I
yeah.
had great connection with them as well. So it was and then the other travels. So absolutely, it's I just inherently don't see the world the same as my friends who grew up here in America.
Never been,
You know.
like never been.
Hmm.
So would you suggest for someone either kind of building, like let's say if they are building a company that they know they're gonna probably have over 300 employees with different background, would you suggest for them like, hey, travel the world, go see somewhere, or not necessarily be like, hey, I'm going to Miami for vacation, like go outside the country, kind
Yeah, well, Miami's pretty crazy. So,
of. Yeah,
uh, I love Miami.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we can take the qualifier of that size of business away and just say it doesn't matter.
Mm,
Go get outside of your worldview, because your worldview is inherently limited, right? It's
yeah,
that the whole idea of getting outside of your comfort zone, because
yeah,
we'll just kind of perpetuate the comfortable known, and we'll do that into infinity until we challenge that comfortable known. And so back to that kind of process too, as an internal, as a self growth, this
mm,
personal transformation side of it, it comes back to the same thing: strategy, vision. Who do you want to be?
yeah.
Because you're not that right now, and if you
Mhm.
don't challenge it, you're just going to repeat the past. The familiar past becomes the predictable, boring future, and then life is unfulfilling, life is boring, life is
Yeah,
right, because we're just repeating the same thing. So a
yeah,
powerful way to change that is to, just go expose yourself to something new. That'll definitely help. So I don't care how big of a company you're trying to build. Even if you
yeah.
just want to be a freelance solopreneur for the rest of your life, go travel, expose yourself. Man, I knew people in Pueblo who had never left Pueblo, Colorado in their entire life, you know, and that's
Yeah,
tragic because that is a very limited worldview there. But I've met
yeah,
people that have never left the country that they live in too, and it's you can tell that their ceiling, their belief of what's possible is limited by the world, the cultural worldview that they're steeped in. So absolutely, shocking yourself out of your known and going and experiencing something unknown, a culture shock, is
yeah.
very, very healthy and powerful.
Culture shock, you say, is very, very powerful.
Yeah.
Perfect. I like that. I like that. That's awesome. Like, listen, Peter. Before we go, uh, can you leave us with one? What would you say? Maybe just one thing that you can say to business owner or like founder, startup kind of that you know
Yes. Take
mhm,
ownership. Take
take
ownership of your results. Your results are your right. You have what you are looking for. So until you change what you are looking for, you will keep having the same results. So if you're unhappy with your results, if you feel stagnant, if you're not making the money that you want, your sales conversions are garbage, your marketing isn't working, you want that. That's the hard reality. And there's
yeah,
no softening that message. And I wouldn't want to soften it for you because it's a disservice. You want that unconsciously. Of course you don't consciously want it. We all say, "Well, I want it," but ultimately we're making ourselves a victim of something. So take ownership. How? What am I doing? Right? How can I make this different? And then ask a results oriented question. How can I change this? What can I do? What can I heal? Not why. Why me? Well, that's just victimhood. Why me? Well,
yeah,
okay, what can I do to change it? Because
yeah.
that question already presupposes that you can. And you will hear something, when you ask that question, you will hear something along the lines of rise, take up your bed, and walk. So be willing and ready to do that.
Thank you so much, Peter, guys, and thank you so much for listening to the headliners. Well, my guest today was Peter Lynch, a speaker, coach, and a proud dad who's on a mission to empower entrepreneurs to go from revenue plateau to self sabotage to breakthrough performance and profit. so they can serve more people and fulfill their purpose. Thanks again, Peter, for being an awesome guest.
Oh, thank
And
you.
we connected on LinkedIn. We'll keep talking, my friend. Thank you so
Yes.
much.
Oh, thank
Just give
you.
me a
This has been
second.
awesome.
Thank you.